So this lesson is on 3-digit dividend, 1-digit divisor. So I'm going to model this step by step for you. You should pause this video at any time in order to catch up, and you should do the examples with me. There's going to be 2 examples in this lesson, so that way you're actually following along and doing the process as well. So I'm going to start with 288 divided by 2. All right, so notice again, this is my 1-digit divisor, but my 3-digit dividend. So my quotients are going to be greater, okay? The process is still the same, but there's a few changes that we need to make when we're working with bigger numbers, okay? So I've got 2 as my divisor, so I'm going to stick with, like I know before, my multiples of 2, listing the first 5 multiples of 2. And remember, we know our multiples of 10, so we're going to put 10 in there as well. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8, 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 times 2 is 20. Now here's the thing with this. These products are much less than 288. So how do I fix this? What do I need to do here? I'm going to do something where I call this my magic zeros. This can be 1 times 2, or it can be 10 times 2 equals 20. I make these zeros smaller because I can read this as 1 times 2 equals 2, or 10 times 2 equals 20. All right, let's do them for all of them. 20 times 2 equals 40. 30 times 2 is 60, 40 times 2 is 80, 50 times 2 is 100, and 100 times 2 is 200. Ooh, I like that number because that's going to get me pretty close to this. Whereas 20, if I just stuck with 20 or 10 or 8, it would take me a long time to keep subtracting, okay, till I got to 0 or any number less than 2. So now, what can I multiply by 2 to get me close, where my product rather is close to 288? Well, let's look at my chart here. I know that 100 times 2 is 200. 200 seems to be the closest number to 288. So let's subtract 200 and putting 100 on the side as my partial quotient. 8 minus 0 is 8 is 8. 8 minus 0 is 8. All right, working with much smaller numbers now. All right, so what can I multiply by 2 where my product is going to get me close to 88? Well, let's look at my chart here. 20, 40, 60, 80. Ooh, I like 80. I can do 40 times 2 to get to 80. So let's do that. Let's do minus 80. But again, I have to multiply 40 times 2 to get there. So put your 40 as your partial quotient. 8 minus 0 is 8. Now I'm working with a smaller number now. So now, this is why I call them magic zeros. If you want, you can get rid of these zeros now. You can scratch them out, you can erase them, you can just cross them out. Now this becomes just like we knew before. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, and so on. So how am I going to get to 8? Well, I know 4 times 2 is 8. So let's do that. Let's do 4 times 2 is 8, and let's subtract 8. And that's going to give me 0, which is a nice number that we're working with here. So I don't have any remainder. Now I'm going to look at my partial quotients. The only difference about this is my numbers are greater, so I really have to pay attention when I'm adding. 100 plus 40 plus 4. Well, I know 100 plus 40 is going to give me 140. Plus 4 is going to give me 144 as my quotient. All right, now to check. This is the only tricky thing about the check. We are not learning 3-digit, because typically, remember, to check we would do 144 times 2. Well, we haven't learned 3-digit by 1-digit, but I'm just going to go through it with you very quickly using area model because it's not very tricky. We also are going to use a calculator in class as well to check, but you're not always going to have a calculator available. So let me show you area model very quickly. And this is not too tricky. Because I've got a 3-digit number here, I need 3 columns. 100, break this up in expanded form, 44 times 2. Because this number's into the hundreds, I have 3 columns. 100 times 2 is 200. 40 times 2 is 80. 4 times 2 is 8. Adding all of my partial products. And this is only to check. This is not a part of the division process. I've already got my quotient. I'm just checking. Now, remember, to figure out is my answer correct, I want to get 288. I want to find that dividend. So, oh look, when I added up all my partial products, there's 288 right there. So the answer, the quotient to 288 divided by 2 equals 144. And I knew that was correct because I multiplied 144 times 2 and I ended up with my dividend. All right, I'm going to show you one more example with a greater divisor. Same process as before. We're going to do 426 divided by 7. And I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do my multiples of 7 of my divisor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's stick 10 in there too. 1 times 7 is 7. 2 times 7 is 14. 3 times 7 is 21. 4 times 7 is 28. 5 times 7 is 35. 10 times 7 is 70. Now again, I'm working with a greater dividend, so let's put our magic zeros. 10 times 7 is 70. 20 times 7 is 140. 30 times 7 is 210. 40 times 7 is 280. 50 times 7 is 350. 100 times 7 is 700. All right, so what can I multiply by 7 to get me close to 426 as my product? Well, let's look at my chart here. Let's look at my multiples. Well, I can't do 7 times 100 because it's going to give me 700. That's going to be too big. All right, so I really could get rid of that altogether. Well, let's look, what's the next smallest here? 350, that's less than 426. Let's use that. Let's do 7 times 50 to get me 350. And let's subtract by that. I like this. I've got some regrouping here. So 6 minus 0 is 6. I cannot do 2 minus 5. I can't take 5 from 2. So I need to regroup. Move to your hundreds. Okay, 12 minus 5, 7. And 3 minus 3 is 0. All right, so now I'm working with a smaller number again. But let's look at what I've got. Where do I see